Hello, welcome back to the Irish Tennis Updates podcast. Thanks very much for listening. Today I think I've got a really good episode with a really good guest. Garry Cahill has done it all in Irish tennis. He spent 13 years as High Performance Director, during which time he was instrumental in setting up the National Tennis Centre in DCU. He's been captain of both the Irish Davis and Fed Cup teams, and last year he set up Prodigy Tennis that offers a wide range of services and programmes to help develop tennis in this country. We talk about where tennis started for Garry, his experiences in tennis, his advice for parents, coaches and players, and more. I think it's a really good episode. There's a lot to take from it, and I hope you enjoy. So Garry, if you could have any superpower, what would you choose and why?
Right, okay. Maybe to be able to read people's minds might be good sometimes, especially when you're coaching, when you don't know what people are thinking.
Yeah.
You can tell sometimes, but other times you don't know, and then things can happen in matches. For example, you don't know what's in their mind. So maybe if you could read their minds, it might help.
I could see that coming in handy, all right. Yeah. So just how's life been for you the last couple of months since lockdown got started?
Yeah, it's been okay. I mean, you just get used to it. The first couple of weeks were tricky because the routine stops very suddenly. Like it was almost like it was changed completely overnight. And then you realize that there's nothing you can do. So you have to just adapt and develop a new routine and start doing things that you probably should have been doing anyway, but you never had the time to do them. I haven't found it too bad. I just, obviously like a lot of people, you're just looking forward to getting back to some kind of normality again.
Absolutely. You mentioned adapting there. So what kind of stuff have you been doing to adapt to the situation, maybe in terms of coaching or your academy?
Yeah, well, I mean, the academy stuff, we didn't do any online coaching. I'm not sure about the value of doing like group kind of training online. We have done some given physical programs to athletes, and some of the players that I work with one-to-one, they have done some technical work during this time and physical work. But nothing out of the ordinary. Also doing some stuff with parents in the last couple of weeks. I know you've been on one or two of them. And they've been useful because it's a time when you can get parents together. It's very difficult to get like 100 parents into a room. So it helps with Zoom and things like that. Personally, routines, I still get up early in the morning because, you need to keep yourself active. I do some physical. And and then apart from that, I'm just working in other areas so that we're ready to hit the ground running when things do go back.
Yeah, do you think there's anything that you've maybe learned from this time or anything you'll take away from it? Or is it just a case of getting through it and getting back to normal as soon as possible, do you think?
I think I learned that a tennis lesson should never be cancelled because of bad weather.
Yeah.
If there's nothing else that coaches learn from this, and I'm not talking about like these, doing a tactical session, but you can always run a physical session. You can always have meetings with your players. You can, there are things that we can do now that we probably didn't know we could have done. So that's definitely something that I've learned from it. I suppose the other thing is the importance of competition for motivation for professional players, because the big problem they're all having at the moment is, what do I train for? There's no matches. It's difficult to get yourself to the same level of motivation as if you're playing a tournament next Monday. So that's been tricky for people, and I think for coaches, parents and players, the lesson there is you've got to periodize your plan so that your matches are there at the right time.
Yeah, no, you were saying even there, there's no motivation, there's nothing coming up. It's not even that there's nothing coming up. You don't even know when, you don't even know when it might be, if it's even going to be 2020 or into next year at all. You just don't have a clue.
Yeah, but I was talking to a coach in Austria this morning, and they've already started tournaments. So Germany started tournaments. So it's like some countries are weeks ahead of where we're at the moment. And I know in Russia they're starting tournaments, money tournaments. So like they know there's tournaments about to happen. They just don't know when the ATP and WTA tournaments and ITF tournaments will happen.
Yeah. You know. Talking about a timeline, when would you expect to get back to some coaching face to face in the academy?
Well, the academy's indoors, so that won't happen indoors until September. But like, depending on how it goes, we might do something outdoors before that. Yeah. But look, we don't know. I mean, there could be another wave. You know, we could be all locked down again. So just can't do it. You can't really plan it.
No, that's it. It's just you just have to see how it goes and kind of plan as you go, I guess, isn't it? Yeah. And just to take it back to where kind of tennis started for you briefly. So how did you get into tennis and kind of at the start of the journey?
Well, I was from Mullingar originally, and there was quite a popular sport in the town because the tennis club was in the middle of Mullingar and there wasn't much else to do. We didn't have tons of sports to go to every day. So, you know, we kind of drifted into tennis. It wasn't in the background with parents. Just ended up going to the tennis club and hitting tennis balls and starting like that. Like most kids did back then, it was completely different. Your first tennis experience was not coaching.
Yeah.
Your first experience was playing, and then maybe if you got a bit better, then you started coaching. It was the other way around.
Yeah. So you started then in Mullingar. So how was your kind of your time playing the game? Like how did you play for a long time?
Yeah, I played right through. I was a pretty good junior. I would have been like, top 8, top 4 for a while in the age group kind of thing. So like I was okay. I wasn't special. I was okay. And I mean, I played obviously all the tournaments through, and I like coaching from even a younger age, like 19, 20. I was kind of drifting more into coaching. Not because I suppose I saw it as a career at that stage. I was more doing it like most people started, just as a way of staying in the sport and maybe making some pocket money at the time. Then I enjoyed it and thought that it would be a nice way to have a career and feel like you never really had to work. That's how I got into it.
Yeah. So how was that journey then from starting coaching, as you said, around 1920, then being appointed the high performance director with Tennis Ireland? So how did you kind of go from starting out in coaching to kind of the top job pretty much in the country?
So I started off coaching, then I ended up working in provincial programs. We had some good players who came from around the area at that time. We actually did well. Then I was asked to go into provincial training. Then Tennis Ireland, they brought in a consultant, a Belgian guy called Ivo van Aken, about 14 years ago. He did a review of Irish tennis, trying to improve the standard. And at that time, he asked me actually another guy, Paul Casey, who is a good coach. We worked together at that time. And then I was asked to take over as national coach, which was not a full-time job, by the way. A lot of people think that it was full-time. It was very much a part-time job. And we started with a small group of players that we only worked part-time with as well. So it was nearly the equivalent of what you see now with provincial squads. And then in Ivo's opinion, when he looked at Irish tennis, he thought, like other countries, you need to develop a national tennis centre because this is the way you need to go to produce players. And that's where I got involved with him to try and structure what is now DCU. So that's how I got involved.
Yeah, no, I know you were obviously instrumental in creating that National Tennis Centre. So, and it was obviously the first time that we'd had something like that in Ireland. So, what main challenges did you encounter in creating that, and how were those overcome?
I mean, at the time we had a CEO who was, really behind the idea of having a national tennis center, and
Okay.
that made it a bit easier because they fundraised and they, borrowed money, and they, eventually had the agreement to take some space in Albert College Park to build a national tennis center, which started off quite small. We started off with the 4 courts, and
Okay.
then we gradually expanded the center. The challenges for us at the time, I would say, well, firstly, to convince players that they need to train the number of hours that they needed to train.
Right.
Because the culture at that stage was players would train 3-4 times a week, and that was a lot. But in actual fact, we knew that the international level players at the same age were already training 6 days a week. They were having a lot of science support around them. In some cases, they were actually living in the same centres, and they were schooling in the same centres. So, we had a lot of those challenges to get as well the resources to put what we needed around players, because it really was not, we were trying to do it without a big enough kind of budget at that time. So we had to gradually grow it to get to the point that we were at. But I'd say the challenges were, okay, you have to build a coaching team. You need to have high level coaches. You need to really try and build that. That doesn't appear out of nowhere. You need to build a facility. That's a challenge. You need the money to do it. You need the right leadership in place in the organization to support all those things. So they were all challenges along the way, but we did overcome them.
Yeah. So how big you did create it? How big of a success was the National Tennis Centre once you had it in operation?
Well, we started in 2008, and at that time there were 28 players ranked internationally. Because at that time, one of the things we did was we looked at international practice and we said, okay, where are we? And what are we going to try and do? And Evo had already agreed with the federation. The first step was a national tennis center. And we went from 28 players ranked to, in 2018, we had 60 players ranked internationally. Okay. So we had grown the number of players that were ranked internationally, more players were playing, and we had grown also the level. Because what people don't understand is all the players who played Grand Slams from Ireland in the last 10 years spent time in the National Tennis Centre.
Okay.
Including Connor. Yeah. Including Sam. He was there for from 13 to 18, 5 years, including Simon. All of those guys, including Georgia, she was there from 8 to 15. Right. They all went through the National Tennis Centre. And without having a centre like that, I don't believe we would have had those players coming through at that level. Because the first thing players need is a good base. And without having the individual approach to training and the scientific support around players, that's not possible. So when we talk about success, okay, we didn't have an Andy Murray, but for the amount of investment that went into a project like that, I think we did well. There were times when, and also probably people don't remember this, but going back, I think it was, I think my years are getting a little bit, 13, was it? Okay, so there was a time when there were 2 Irish players, 2 boys playing a junior Grand Slam. Those 2 boys actually were some of the first 2 boys we started with in the National Centre. They both played Grand Slams together.
Who were they?
That was Sam Barry and John Morrissey. Now, John trained in the beginning of his time in the National Centre, and then he did his own individual work with Owen Casey as well, which is the case in the National Centre. You start players and you give them a base, but they'll also work with their individual coaches, and they should. But we provided a lot of service that these kids and these professional players would not have had unless there was a national tennis centre.
Yeah.
And there were times when, Connor, James, Peter Botwell was in the National Tennis Centre. Like, there were times when all of these guys were getting their support, their scientific support, all of this stuff under the same roof. And yeah, I would say we did a lot of good things. We took tennis from where it was at then to the next stage. So yeah, there's a lot of positives. As I said, we had a lot more players ranked. The rankings were higher. Okay, we didn't have an Andy Murray, but if you want an Andy Murray and you want to have really top players, we need a bigger investment as well.
Yeah. Yeah, no, it sounds like that was obviously a really, really successful project. Do you have a couple of on-court highlights from those years with the National Tennis Centre?
Well, I do think, one of the highlights was the day that Connor qualified for Wimbledon, because it was the first one. Highlights of juniors and Grand Slams was, really nice to experience that, and for the team of coaches that were working. It wasn't just me, by the way, for all the guys who were working in the National Centre at that time.
Yeah.
To experience young Irish players playing in Grand Slams, which was our ambition. It wasn't, we had an ambition that we could take players from a young age and get them to Grand Slam level, junior. That was our goal.
Yeah.
At that stage, some players will decide to go to college. Some players will decide to go on the Pro Tour. But our first objective was to get juniors into Grand Slams. Right. And that felt like a great achievement for us when you see young kids starting at 8 and then you eventually see them in the French Open or Wimbledon or the US Open or Australia. Yeah, they were all nice feelings. But I think probably from an Irish context, possibly to see Connor qualifying for his first slam and then doing it in the US Open a few months later was nice to see.
So I know while you were there, you also spent time as Davis Cup captain and as Fed Cup captain as well, right? So did you have
separately, not together?
Yeah. And do you have a couple of overriding memories from firstly the time as Davis Cup captain?
What are they? Let me think. We had some good ties. We had a very interesting tie in Egypt when it went an extra day.
Okay, yeah.
It was quite a long tie where we ended up winning. Sheriff and McGee had a long match that ran to a Monday, and we ended up winning that tie, which was a really nice feeling. Great. Although it always feels a bit different when you're away from home.
Yeah.
And then I suppose I always look back to Barry King's win in Riverview when he came on to play the fifth rubber, which was a nice one because we looked kind of down and out. We were 2-1 down after doubles, and then Connor had a good win against Chasiri in singles, which when you look back now was a really good win.
Yeah.
And then Barry won the fifth rubber. So yeah, we had some really, really nice ties. And Fed Cup, we ended up promoting in Mauritius.
Okay.
And went to Estonia where we had a really good opportunity to play against. Estonia at the time had 2 top 100 girls.
Right.
Marit Annie was one of them. Sorry, the second one's gone a bit blank. I could picture her, but Canopy was the second one.
Oh, yeah.
And we had a good experience playing against them on live TV in Estonia. So, look, they're all really good memories. But Davis Cup is probably the most enjoyable coaching experience because of the fact that you can be on the court and you feel like as a coach you're really part of what's happening.
Yeah, I was going to ask then what you think are the main similarities or differences between the two roles. So you mentioned a more enjoyable coaching experience in Davis Cup. Would there be anything else you'd look at even structurally, in like the differences or similarities between how the job was for you?
Davis Cup always got more recognition than Fed Cup.
Yeah.
It always seemed like we never gave Fed Cup the kind of recognition that it deserved. The media got more involved in Davis Cup, and I always felt that there's more. Fed Cup is something that we should do as sport, and I'm not talking about just in Ireland, but as a sport, it should be bigger and promoted more. Because, like, if you look at the WTA is promoted as a I would say on the same level as ATP, but in Fed Cup always just didn't seem to get the recognition that it should. From a coaching perspective, they were the same, no real difference.
Yeah.
I mean, you try your best in Fed Cup and in Davis Cup, and you have different personalities always along the way, and you deal with that as a coach, as you have to. But I can't say there were too much differences, but I suppose it goes a bit deeper than that. It goes more to the difference between coaching men, coaching women, and they're all different, but equally enjoyable.
So then you left the role in Tennis Ireland last year, 2019, and you set up Prodigy Tennis. So when you set that up, what were the main reasons and goals that you had when you set that up?
Well, the reason I set up Prodigy Tennis was because the federation were not in line with the strategy that I had in my own mind about where players should go. Like, I believe you have to have a very individual approach and bring your best players together to a center and surround them with the best coaching and the best type of science that you can possibly give athletes if you want to produce top players.
Yeah.
And I have to say, the provincial programs do a very good job in Ireland. I mean, it's great to see so many players who are training together. But even the guys in provincial programs will tell you that really, to get players to the top, they need more. They need an individual approach. They need to have a lot of service around them. And I set up Prodigy because I wanted to stay with that approach, because I'm sure, and it's what needs to be done. And we've proved to show that when we did it, we actually did well. We were successful with it. So I wanted to continue that. And Prodigy is, it's really new. It's sometimes it's quite challenging because, again, you don't have the resources in a private capacity to put into all these players that you need. But Prodigy set up to give these players the best possible training we can give them, to look after young Irish talents, and to steer them in the right direction, whether that is college tennis or it's professional tennis. But as I said, we've only started, and it's quite exciting.
Yeah, I remember last year when you were setting up, seeing the pictures from building the courts, which was quite something to see, and just seeing everyone kind of get behind it and help out, to set it up. So everyone was kind of really behind you as you set it up. I guess all those people you had involved.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that was just a sign that there were people there who had the same opinion and wanted to be involved and help, and it was it was great. A lot of parents of performance players, and they helped us to set it up and get it off the ground. So hopefully we can keep supporting.
Yeah, no, I know one player you work with is Vitalia Diachenko, and you've worked with her for I think a few years, and she's in top 100 WTA. So just first of all, where did that relationship with her begin?
Well, going back 6-7 years ago, we made a decision to bring in some top players into the academy, because we thought, and this was as a result as well of discussion with the Sports Council, the Irish Sports Council at the time, we had a conversation around culture and around changing mentality. And we thought, well, look, a good way to do this is to bring in top players to spar and train in our environment, which other sports have done. And we had two players who came in. Marta Siratina was one. She got to 150, and Natalia, obviously, who's got right up to 72. And they came in, but they were not there all the time. They were coming in and out, which was fantastic for our players. Particularly at that time, we had the likes of Amy Botel and, people like this who got to spar with these players, gave them confidence, it gave them awareness of what the standards were. So it started like that. And then Italia would come over and back, a couple of times a year, max. And then, when I finished with Tennis Ireland, then I just spent the last year doing a bit more with her because I was freer to work with her. That's how it started.
And then you've been working with her for a while. What's kind of the highlights from that time with her so far?
Well, it was good for her to obviously break top 100. Good for her to get up to 70. She's had some very good wins, including, I suppose, the Sharapova win in Wimbledon was a big one. That was probably one of the best wins for her. Unfortunately, she had a tough one in Australia with Danielle Collins, but it was really tight. And she's shown that she is at the level. And hopefully in the next year to 2 years, she can make a breakthrough to top 50. That's the goal, but hopefully she can.
I know in Prodigy, as well as working with having a lot of junior programs in place, you do also work with obviously some of the top Irish players who play internationally, like Simon Carr and Amar. So what are your thoughts on Irish tennis at the moment and how it might progress into the future?
Well, this is a tough enough question, and we probably need. Well, I'll go back to what I said, and I'll say that we need, firstly, ambition, and I believe that there's a lot of talk there that it's not possible, and we shouldn't be aiming for producing top players. It's difficult. You hear this all the time that some countries have loads of money, they can't do it, and I don't believe that. I think the first thing we need is ambition. If we don't have that, we're never going to go anywhere. And this idea that, well, all we can do in Ireland is work with young kids and ship them off to a college because we can't do anything else is not, as far as I'm concerned, it's not the way to think. I do believe that we should support Irish kids and get them into the best possible US colleges if that's what they want to do. But I also believe we need a system in place that if we have players who want to be professional players when they're young, that they're supported. Because if you look at European players and you look at top European players, very few top European players were produced through college. That's the reality of it. There are obviously more Americans, but they're also supported by the USDA. But I believe we should support the players in whatever path they want to go, whether it's good colleges or whether it's professional level. But if we're going to get players to good colleges or professional tennis, you need to have a really, really, really well-structured national center with money, investment. The players need to be individualized. They need to have all the support around them. Great coaches, great physical trainers, psychologists, nutritionists. You need to be able to give them what they need to get to the level. Because if you look what other countries are doing, they're moving forward all the time with their science, with their support. If we expect that we can put players on artificial grass around the country, it's not going to produce top-level players. You've got to bring the best players together. So, in my opinion, in 5 years' time, I'm not sure if you're going to see Irish players coming through unless these players, unless we start to have very structured programs for these players. Because I can tell you from being in the other federations of the countries, they're doing this. So it doesn't matter if you say, well, we found someone that's this extremely talented kid, but that doesn't matter at the end of the day because they're extremely talented kids around the world. And if you go back to leaving kids outdoors, training groups, it's not going to produce tennis players. Because let's be honest, it didn't do it before, and it didn't do it before 2008. There were some very good players before that, but a lot of those players before that, they were also coming from having good coaches, working individually, etc., etc. So, that's my feeling. So if you ask me now how I think it's going to be, maybe we'll have this conversation in 5 years. In 5 years' time, and we'll know. But that's what I predict happening unless we restructure. I know that Tennis Ireland they're going to present a new performance plan. I know they're working on it because I was consulted on it. So I'm looking forward to seeing what that is, and I hope that that's the kind of strategy that they're going to take. And and I know that Prodigy will definitely be working on trying to bring in sponsors to invest in our players and try to give them a lot of services that we can. And hopefully we can work together with this strategy if, Tennis Ireland have something in place that will help everybody.
Yeah, so I guess the end goal that you'd have in mind, and that I know you've worked with Vitalia, who's got to top 100, and top 100 is something you talk about a lot as a goal. What do you think it takes to break? I know you've probably touched on a lot of these points, but what do you think it takes to break into the top 100 as a player?
Well, first thing you need is you need to have the right mentality. That's the first thing. And what I mean by that is you need to be resilient because you're going to have a lot of ups and downs in your career. You need just 100% commitment to the sport. If you don't have that, it's going to be very tough. You need to have money because without that, it's actually impossible, which is sad to say, but you need to have money. And then you need the coaches. You need really good coaches, and you need the scientific support, because without that, you're probably not going to be developed properly as an athlete. You're potentially injured. You need all of those things around the athlete. You need the competition structure around the athlete at the points when they need it, and you need the coaches with the athletes in this competition structure. Then you have a chance to break through. But if you leave any of those out, you're playing catch up.
Yeah.
In my opinion.
Yeah. I just wanted to touch for a couple of minutes on your kind of advice for people involved. So we'll look at maybe parents, coaches, players. So if we start with parents, what advice did you have for parents of junior players? I know this is something you've been working on maybe during this lockdown with your webinars on Zoom, talking to some famous parents of tennis players and other sports people. But I guess if you were to give your top one or two pieces of advice for tennis parents, what advice did you have for them?
So the first thing is make sure that you don't spoil your kids, because if you want them to be performance tennis players, they have to be mentally strong, mentally tough, and my advice is to make them as independent as possible when they're young, and try to get them to make decisions, get them to take over their tennis as young as possible. I mean, within reason, I'm not talking about letting your kids walk 10 miles to a tennis court, right? But I mean, develop independence young. Get them working with good coaches, and there are a lot of good coaches in Ireland. So I think You can pick good coaches, get them working with good coaches that have produced players, and get them working on an individual basis with good coaches. Also, they're going to do some squad work, but don't have it the other way around.
Yeah.
Don't have all squads. Knowing, get the individual stuff is key. And I think that they need to build a relationship, get them to build a relationship with a really good coach from the beginning. I think that's critical.
Yeah, so I'm just going to move on to the coach, but before I move on to the coach, just a bit of a segue between the two. What do you think the relationship between parent and coach should look like?
Well, I think the coach has got to understand the perspective of the parent, and the parent has to understand the perspective of the coach.
Okay.
And they need to have an agreement somewhere there as to, what are the roles. So the coach has very clear role, and the parents have clear roles, and try not to cross over those roles. But I think you need to have those conversations with the parents about what you're trying to do as a coach, what your philosophy is. And then I think it's also the job of the tennis coach to educate the parents. And then it's the job of the parent to let the coach coach.
Yeah.
So to get those things right, it's a trust as well between both, and it has to be built up over time.
Yeah, so to move on to coach then, what advice do you have for tennis coaches, or maybe to put that slightly differently, what do you think makes a good tennis coach?
I think you have to travel. I think a good tennis coach has to travel, because you need to be out there. It depends what you want to do as a coach, because there are coaches who, want to work in clubs and work with recreational players. And if that is your goal, then you don't need to be out on a tennis tour looking at 12s, European Championships, or the 14s.
Yeah.
But if you want to be a performance coach, you got to choose what area of performance do you want to work at and travel. Because the best form of learning is not actually coach education programs or courses. It's being out there on the road. That's where you feel the tennis. That's where you see the tennis. That's where you learn more than any let's say webinar or coach workshop. You need to be out there seeing what the norms are, seeing what the level is. If you start off as a coach and you start with a 9-year-old and you're going to work with them for 10 years, you need to know what the best players in the world look like at all those stages if you're going to try and produce players that are the best. So you need to be out there.
Yeah, that makes complete sense. Just to move on finally then to your advice for the players themselves, for junior players.
So for young, are you talking about young kids, or what kind of age?
If we break it up into maybe two bits, maybe if you say firstly aged maybe 8, 9, 10.
Okay, well, at this stage of the development, you're learning the tools, so you're starting to develop a game, and you have to focus on getting the basis of the game right. So unfortunately at this stage, you're going to be limited unless you have good technique. So you need to develop the technical skills.
Yeah.
And sometimes that's not the most fun way, but you have to do it. So you have to spend the time developing the skills and practice. You have to practice the skills until you can do it with your eyes closed, and you can do it without having a clear thought process as to what you're actually doing when you know that something's automatic. But that's a phase that you have to go through at that age.
And then looking at when you're maybe around 15, so say 15, 16, what advice then?
Well, at this stage, at 15, 16, you're developing your kind of game style, let's say. You're also developing very much as an athlete. You've gone through your second growth spurt. So you're going to have a lot of time here developing, become a more powerful athlete. You're going to have a lot of time here developing how you're going to play the game in your future career. You're going to be looking at the type of strengths that you have in your game and developing those strengths. So at this age, yeah, it's a lot of physical development. Get out there, play the tournaments, learn how you want to play, and I suppose be really, aware of what your strengths are and how you're going to maximize those strengths. Don't look at other players and think that you have to be there. More important to understand how you are going to be as a player, because there are differences. There may be some things that you have to be able to do. So, for example, at this age, the serve is becoming more important. You're already starting to get 3 points off your serve. And that's normal but there are certain things that you can be more individual on, and you're learning those at that stage.
Yeah, so I'll just have a couple more questions for you, Gary. Really appreciate your time today. Well, just a few more general questions, maybe. What's the favorite place you've ever been with tennis? Maybe coaching, most likely. What's your favorite place you've ever been?
Funny, because they're all the same. You don't really get to enjoy them.
Right.
You don't really get to enjoy them. I've been in some shitholes, but which, like, you nearly get to a stage where once they're at a certain level, it's okay, because you're going to be in the tennis club and the courts and back to the hotel. But I've been in a few places that were rough. Where's the best place? I think Melbourne was really nice. It's a really nice city, and it feels more like you're at home. So I like Melbourne, and I like Italy as well. If I were to kind of choose places, Italy is, and Spain, of course. Yeah, more of those places. Yeah, but there. If you go on holidays, I don't know if I go to. Well, I might go to Spain. I don't know if I go on holidays to any of them. But still, when you're there, you're there. So
yeah. Well, what's your favorite thing about coaching tennis?
Coaching is kind of one of those things that you end up understanding that you have to take a back seat and watch people develop. And when you get your head around that part, I really enjoy seeing people developing. And then I also enjoy learning still a lot of new things about coaching. So I would say, just taking yourself out of it, seeing people developing, and then when something new that you discover or learn, it really still motivates me, that piece, And if you lose that, I think it's very, I imagine that point could be tough to keep motivation.
Yeah.
So those two things, and that doesn't matter the level, really, whether it's a top player, or a young 7-year-old. It makes no difference. It's still motivating. You get the same motivation out of watching a 7-year-old developing as watching, somebody else that's much better.
Yeah.
So they're the things that I suppose I enjoy most about it.
Yeah. For this one, you can kind of take whatever approach you want to this question. If you could change one thing about tennis, what would you change?
If I could change one thing, look, I wouldn't change the rules. No, and WTA started coaching on court, which is nice, but I'm not sure if I'd change it in all tournaments. I think the money thing is a problem for players, and it's becoming now a bigger issue. It's nearly like there's some kind of financial doping for athletes, because players who have a lot of money can invest more in themselves, and the lower ranked players are finding that it's harder to get up because they don't have what top players have. But then I would also say that they were also lower ranked players at a point. They didn't have the same money then either. You know what I mean? There was a point when, although some of them didn't spend long, there was the point where someone like Malik Jasiri that we spoke about earlier, saw him in futures for a long time.
Yeah.
Sometimes he was on his own. He had no coaches, he had no physical trainers. But when he broke into the top 100, top 80, he had coaches and trainers because he could afford to pay for them. So there is that point that you need to get up there to have these things, you know?
Yeah.
You need to show that you're good enough to get these things as well. So, but it should be spread out. I think if you're around, 300, you should be able to make a living from the tour.
Yeah.
Definitely. If you get to that stage and you're playing qualifying at slams and you're playing the highest level challengers, I do think that the money is too low. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. I think if I could change anything, would spread the money out a bit more.
Yeah. I must say, Gary, I think we'll leave it there. So just thanks so much for coming on and talking today, and guys, good luck with all your work in Prodigy and all the other work you're doing. I hope everything goes well.
And good stuff. You promote Irish tennis. I see your Twitter and stuff, and well done, because I think the players need the promotion. It helps them to hopefully find some sponsors eventually.
Yeah.
So that's good.
Well, thank you. Thanks very much.
Okay, good stuff. All the best.
Yeah. Big thanks again to Gary for taking the time to talk, and thanks to you for listening to this episode. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, please subscribe, leave a review, like it, and share it with anyone else you think might be interested. I hope you're keeping well. If you're back to tennis, I hope you're enjoying it and staying safe. And until next time, I've been Adam, your host. Goodbye.